Hi everyone, Shahzadi here. Today I want to talk to you about something unrelated to nutrition yet extremely important. It does not matter what your profession and background are because what's happening in the world, particularly in neighbouring America, is a collective issue we must tackle. I was only 6 when my family uprooted to the UK. The painted image of our impending move consisted of serenity, adventure, and excitement. I was apprehensive but very thrilled about my foreseeable European life. What I wasn't told was how different it'll be. When I started school, I was visibly different. My lunches consisted of chapatis and leftover curries. There was a stark difference in my family life in comparison to my friends. I would try and speak English, but with a different accent. My long curly hair would always be tied in a long plait. But most importantly, I looked uniquely different. However, this wasn't the first time I'd experienced feeling out of place. As a brown child, I'd faced my fair share of colorism many times. Unsurprisingly, this came from my own community. At 5, I was encouraged not to play in the sun because it would ruin my light complexion. I didn't understand why it mattered, but I became hesitant to play in the sun. Children around me were repeatedly told not to drink chai because it contained skin-darkening properties. However, adults would have it, a logic I never understood. And to this day, South Asian children are taught names of fairness creams before they are taught how to read. Many Bollywood celebrities are complicit in promoting whiteness in South Asians. What we Desis tend to forget is our own history and heritage. Let me tell you a little history lesson about the Siddhis, people of African descent living in present-day India and Pakistan. They are mostly concentrated in Sindh and Balochistan in Pakistan, as well as Hyderabad, Karnataka, and Gujarat in India. While many of them came to Hindustan as slaves, others came as sailors, soldiers, mercenaries, merchants, eunuchs, concubines, and pearl divers. Siddhi merchants were supposedly one of the first people to make Muslim contact with Hindustan in what is today's Gujarat. Later, the Umayyad Caliphate expansion in 712 AD into Sindh by Muhammad bin Qasim brought in black soldiers to Sindh. This means that Siddhis have been present in South Asia for thousands of years and unfortunately are not represented in media, education, and popular culture at all. They are only footnotes in history books, and in Sindh and Balochistan, their communities continue to be ruled by poverty. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter as South Asians, it is important to recognize that injustices against Black people are a global phenomenon. When I watched that horrific video of George Floyd being mercilessly killed by a police officer, it made my stomach churn. The other thing that horrified me was the second police officer watching him suffer. An Asian man being as racist as his white counterpart. This just proves that racism isn't always black and white. The oppressed can also be the oppressor. As a British Canadian who is South Asian, there have been so many instances where I've witnessed hurtful remarks for Black people from my community. We often refer to them as kala and not in a positive way. It is a derogatory term used to make fun of someone's skin color. A Desi woman's biggest fear is having a child who is dusky in complexion. This fear usually doesn't stem from her own beliefs, but rather the society that tells her how a dark child will be looked down upon for their entire lives. So from birth, she starts lathering her child in haldi Uptan and fairness creams in the hopes to lighten their perfectly natural and beautiful skin color. What South Asians conveniently forget is how the Black community has paved the way for us to move and immigrate to North American countries so easily. It was a civil rights movement between 1945 and 1965 meant to eradicate racial discrimination led by African Americans and African Canadians that made our lives easier. So when they raise their voices against racial injustice, how can we bear to stay quiet? How can we possibly turn our noses up to their plight? We need to interrupt our own prejudices. Our incorrect biases do not benefit us. They only serve to uphold white supremacy. We need to own our individual part in anti-Black racism so we can change our collective behavior. Here are some examples how you can amplify Black voices and bring positive change. Help organizations involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. Organizations such as Black Lives Matter, Reclaim the Block, and Black Visions Collective are taking immediate action to support the movement across the states and the world. I have left their links in the description box. Funds to help victims. You can donate to loved ones and support them in their investigations through the GoFundMe pages listed on the official Black Lives Matter donation page, which include the George Floyd Memorial Fund, the Ahmaud Arbery Fund, as well as funds for Regis Korchinski, whose death in Toronto is currently under Special Investigative Unit investigation for police brutality. Support Black businesses and community organizations. There are so many amazing Black-owned businesses in Toronto, from restaurants to clothing to retail, and I've left a link to 100 of them located here in Toronto. Write a letter of solidarity. Detailed information is available on websites such as Amnesty Canada. The link is in the description box. Spread awareness by keeping the subject alive. Racism should be talked about on a daily basis since it takes place on a daily basis. It should never come down to somebody being brutally murdered in order for us to wake up. Keep educating people around you regarding systemic racism and how abhorrent it is. As we deal with ongoing acts of racism amidst a global pandemic, it is our responsibility to never let silence take place. Black lives depend on it, and we must speak against bigotry. This is a time to self-reflect on how we're part of these devastating crimes against humanity and what we can do to change ourselves.